Thomas Hayes had spent the better part of his adult life avoiding moments like this. Moments where adrenaline surged through his veins, where his heart pounded against his ribs like it was trying to escape, where every sensible thought in his head screamed at him to turn around, to pretend he hadn't heard a thing, to keep walking and never look back. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. Because that night, under a sky painted with deep purples and bruised clouds, in a quiet alley most people in the city didn't even glance at, Thomas found himself standing between a terrified woman and two men who meant her harm. It wasn't how his story was supposed to go. But then again, his story hadn't gone as planned for years. Thomas wasn't the kind of man you'd remember in a crowd. He wasn't tall, not particularly broad, and there was a weariness about him, the kind of invisible weight you only noticed if you looked too long. His hands were rough from years of working at Carlson's Auto, his dark hair streaked with threads of gray, and his blue eyes held a kind of perpetual exhaustion. His wife, Sarah, had once told him those eyes were what she fell in love with. Said they looked like the ocean right before a storm. But Sarah was gone now. It had been 10 years since the accident. 10 years since Thomas had stood in a sterile hospital hallway, his 5-year-old daughter Emily clinging to his hand, while a doctor he'd never met delivered words that splintered his world into 1,000 sharp, jagged pieces. He hadn't been the same since. He didn't date, didn't drink much, didn't have friends beyond the guys at the garage who knew better than to ask him out for beers after work. His life was Emily. Every decision, every dollar, every minute, for her. He didn't have room for anyone else. Didn't want to. But life, as it always does, had other plans. It started like any other evening. The cold was biting, a late autumn chill that hinted of winter's arrival. The sun had set hours ago, and most of the city's more respectable citizens had retreated indoors. Thomas had worked late, the heater in an old Buick had blown out, and the owner needed it fixed before morning. Thomas knew what it was to be desperate for warmth. By the time he left the garage, his back ached, and his knuckles stung from cold and oil. He tugged his jacket tighter and took his usual shortcut through the back alleys. He'd walked this path for years, it was faster, quieter, and Emily would be waiting. She always waited. At 13, Emily was stubborn, sharp-witted, with Sarah's fire in her veins. She'd been his anchor through grief, through long nights, through the aching loneliness that gnawed at him when the apartment was too quiet. He was halfway through the alley when he heard it. A woman's voice, sharp, frightened. "Let go of me." Thomas's pulse spiked. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it, to get home to Emily. He didn't need trouble. Couldn't afford it. She needed him. And yet, something in that voice. It sounded like Sarah. Not literally, not in pitch or tone, but in desperation. In the way Sarah had cried out in the dark the night of the crash, trapped in twisted metal before help arrived too late. He couldn't leave someone else alone in the dark. "Let me go, you son of a bitch." The sound of a struggle. Thomas gritted his teeth and turned the corner. Two men had a woman backed against a brick wall, half hidden in the shadows. One had her wrist in a bruising grip, the other standing too close, his face twisted in a cruel smirk. The woman was struggling, her hair a tangled mess, her face streaked with tears. She looked barely 30. Pale, dark hair, eyes wide with terror. And when those eyes met his, something in Thomas shifted. He didn't think. "Hey." His voice was rough, worn from years of shouting over engines, but it carried. The taller man turned. "Walk away, old man. This ain't your business." Thomas took a step closer. "Let her go." The other guy laughed. "Or what? You gonna stop us?" Thomas clenched his fists. Yeah, the fight wasn't cinematic. It was clumsy, brutal, and fast. One of them swung. Thomas ducked, years of bar brawls in his 20s surfacing. He drove his fist into the man's gut. The second attacker grabbed him from behind, but Thomas slammed his elbow back, catching the guy's jaw. There were shouts, a knee to his ribs, the sharp taste of blood in his mouth. But then, the wail of distant sirens. The men bolted, vanishing into the night. And Thomas was left standing there, chest heaving, blood trickling from a split brow. The woman crumpled to the ground. He crouched beside her. "Hey, you okay?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. She nodded, then shook her head. Without thinking, Thomas pulled her into a rough embrace. She clung to him, trembling. He could feel how small she was in his arms. How fragile. And something inside him, something that had been dead for a decade, stirred. "It's over," he murmured. "They're gone." She sobbed against his chest. The cops arrived minutes later. Statements were given. Names exchanged. Her name was Lily Morgan. 28. An artist. Lived a few blocks away. No family nearby. She was supposed to be walking home from a friend's place. When it was over, she looked at Thomas with tear-reddened eyes. "Thank you. You saved my life." Thomas shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." But she scribbled a number on a napkin, handed it to him with trembling fingers. I'd like to see you again. If that's okay." And despite every voice in his head warning him against it, Thomas took the number. It started with a phone call. Awkward. Hesitant. Then coffee at a corner diner. Long conversations about nothing and everything. He learned Lily was stubborn, fiercely independent, and carried her own scars. An abusive ex. A childhood spent in foster care. A fierce love for old jazz records and painting in the middle of the night. She learned Thomas was quiet, loyal to a fault, and still spoke to Sarah's grave every Sunday morning. Emily met her weeks later. It wasn't easy. Emily was protective, wary. But Lily didn't push. She brought Emily art supplies. Listened to her stories. Let her be the one to reach out. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they began to stitch together something broken. Months passed. Seasons changed. The city grew cold, then warm again. Thomas found himself waiting for Lily's calls. For the sound of her laugh. For the way she made even the quiet nights feel less empty. He showed her the old photo albums. Took her to Sarah's grave. Let her see the parts of him no one else had. And one evening, as Emily dozed on the couch and snow fell softly outside, Lily whispered, "I think I'm falling for you." Thomas's throat tightened. "I'm scared of loving you," he admitted. "Me too," she smiled. And they stayed. Years later, Emily would stand beside Thomas as he married Lily under a crooked oak tree behind the old church. She would call her mom without hesitation. And Thomas would finally believe that sometimes, even after everything, love finds its way back. In the quiet streets. In the darkest alleys. In the hearts you thought had forgotten how to beat. And this time, he wouldn't let it go.